The morning sun spilled soft golden light through the stained glass windows, painting the little church in warm colors. The pews were half filled, the air carrying the quiet hum of hymns fading into silence. In the very back, a small girl knelt on the worn wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly, eyes squeezed shut as if she didn't want a single word to escape. 7-year-old Lily's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried a weight far too heavy for a child her age. "God," she murmured, "I just want a dad for Mommy, please." Her tiny frame trembled as if the prayer cost her more than she could give. A few pews ahead, a man shifted slightly, catching the faint sound. He hadn't planned on overhearing anything, he had come here to clear his thoughts, not to listen. But those words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through a heart he thought was long hardened. He turned his head just enough to see her. Messy brown hair, a dress that looked a size too small, knees pressed into the wood as if she could pray her way into a better world. Something in him stirred, something unfamiliar yet aching. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew the tone of that voice, lonely, desperate, and hopeful all at once. And though he didn't bow his head, he felt as though a prayer had just been spoken over his own life, one he wasn't expecting to answer. David sat frozen in the pew long after the little girl's words faded into the stillness. He had come here for quiet, for a place where no one asked about business deals or stock prices. At 45, he had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, yet the silence of his penthouse was colder than winter. He had built his empire brick by brick, but somewhere along the way, the laughter, the warmth, and the sense of belonging had been traded for contracts and deadlines. He thought back to the life he once imagined. Sunday dinners, a small backyard, maybe children who would run to the door when he came home. That dream had slipped through his fingers while he was busy chasing something he thought was more important. Success had come, but it came alone. Lily's prayer replayed in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. She wasn't asking for toys or clothes. She wasn't even asking for herself. She wanted something for her mother, a father figure, someone to stand beside her, someone to love her. The purity of it unsettled him. David had spent years learning how to close deals, yet he couldn't explain why this one moment felt like it was opening a door he'd kept locked for decades. He didn't know the girl, didn't know her mother, but deep down, he felt an odd, unshakable pull. For the first time in years, he left church not thinking about his calendar, but about a prayer that wasn't his, yet somehow was. In the days that followed, David found himself driving through the quieter streets of town, past the worn little house with the crooked mailbox where he'd seen the girl walking after church. He told himself he was just curious, but the truth was harder to admit. He couldn't shake the image of her small hands clasped in prayer. When he learned, through a discreet word with the pastor, that the girl's name was Lily and her mother was Sarah, a waitress struggling to make ends meet, something inside him shifted from curiosity to resolve. He began with small things. A week later, Sarah found a grocery bill mysteriously paid in full. The leaky roof that had been dripping into a cooking pot for months was suddenly fixed by a volunteer program she'd never heard of. An envelope with cash appeared under her door one evening, with no name, just the words, "For what you need most." Sarah was baffled, grateful, and a little uneasy. But Lily, with the kind of innocent certainty only a child can have, simply smiled and said, "It's God answering, Mommy." David never revealed himself. He didn't want thanks. He only wanted to ease the weight that had bent their shoulders for so long. Each act of quiet generosity left him feeling lighter, as though giving away pieces of his fortune was somehow returning pieces of himself. He had no plan beyond helping, but the more he gave, the more he wondered if this was leading him somewhere he had never dared to go. It happened on a breezy Saturday afternoon at the town's annual harvest fair. Children darted between booths with cotton candy, the scent of fresh pies hung in the air, and laughter rose above the hum of chatter. David hadn't planned on staying long. He was there on business, meeting a vendor he sponsored. But as he wandered past the craft stalls, he caught sight of a familiar face. Lily, her brown hair tied in ribbons, tugging on the hand of a woman balancing a tray of drinks. Sarah. He recognized her instantly from the pastor's description, but photographs could never have captured the quiet strength in her eyes. She moved quickly, her smile polite but tired, clearly used to long shifts and short breaks. Lily spotted David first and waved with the kind of openness that left no room for strangers. "Mommy, this is the nice man from church," she chirped, though David was certain they'd never spoken. Sarah blinked in surprise, and then they were talking, about the fair, about the weather, about the small-town quirks they both seemed to know. Conversation came easily, and somewhere between shared laughs and Lily's playful interruptions, David noticed how natural it felt. He didn't have to measure his words or hide behind his polished businessman's mask. By the time the fair lights began to glow against the evening sky, David realized he wasn't thinking about the deals waiting on his desk. He was thinking about Sarah's smile, and how much he wanted to see it again. The church looked the same as it had that first morning, sunlight spilling through stained glass, the air warm with the scent of polished wood, but for Lily, everything felt different. She stood at the end of the aisle in her Sunday dress, holding a hand in each of hers, her mother's on one side, and David's on the other. It had been months since the harvest fair, months of shared dinners, walks in the park, and late-night talks that had slowly woven their lives together. What began as kindness had grown into something none of them had expected, a family. Lily knelt between them at the same pew where she once whispered her prayer. But this time, her voice was steady, her eyes open, her small smile bright. "Thank you, God," she said softly, "for my dad. And for making Mommy smile again." David's hand tightened gently around hers, his chest swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Sarah's eyes glistened, and she leaned closer, the quiet joy between them saying what words could not. For David, this moment was more than an answer to Lily's prayer, it was an answer to one he hadn't even realized his own heart had been asking. He had walked into this church months ago a lonely man, certain he had everything but the one thing he couldn't buy. Now, he was leaving with the two people who had given him that missing piece. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely home.